What's going on, everyone? I appreciate every one of y'all listening to this podcast, everyone who subscribed, liked videos, shared, followed me on social media. I appreciate y'all from the bottom of my heart. It is the best day of the week, Friday, Feel Good Friday, Payday Friday, whatever you want to call it. October 20th, 2023. Can't be much more excited about this podcast, especially what we have coming up, the Michigan scandal and their investigation. Then last night's Thursday night football game. Baseball is getting really interesting. It's a series now that the Astros have won 2 games at the Texas Rangers home. You've also got the Diamondbacks. They walked it off to take 1 game against the Philadelphia Phillies. College football's got one of the best slates of the entire year coming up. You've got, of course, the big one. Everyone's going to be watching it. It's unfortunate that this game is going to be a noon game. You really would like this game to be a little bit later, if not prime time. That's all we ask for. But nonetheless, Penn State, Ohio State, in the shoe, noon game. Alabama, Tennessee, much other games. Those 2 are the biggest ones, in my opinion. And for all justice, all being said, let's just get into this podcast episode. As you all know, that's textbook. So yesterday, news broke out that Michigan has someone on their staff videotaping games, videotaping up future opponents' games, having them go to opponents' games, sign steal. And a lot of people are like, well, what's the issue? A lot of teams sign steal. You can even see it on the television broadcast. You'll see coaches, even position coaches, give out some signs. Or you'll see on the sidelines, they'll have these poster boards with all kinds of different images on them, meaning something to the formation. Opponents will try to do it. You'll see coaches, they'll cover their mouth with the play call sheet. Sometimes you even get a close-up of that play call sheet and you see the plays. So a lot of people are saying, well, what's the difference between that and Michigan? Well, one of the biggest things is that Michigan is having them tape these games, tape specifically the signs, and then they're also paying them on top. So whenever you include money or some kind of incentive that is money, most likely that's usually what it is, most times, that's a big issue. When I first heard of this news, it, of course, not only was surprising, shocking, all of the above, but why? This is a Michigan team that, in my opinion, is one of the most talented that they've had in decades. J.J. McCarthy's playing really good. You have a great offensive line, 2 great and capable running backs, a really good defense. And you're playing against opponents like Purdue, Nebraska. You have to tape Iowa's offense to know that they're practically one of those teams like Army and Navy when it comes to their game, that they just run the football and they're outdated going back to an offense since the 50s, the 60s. You have to tape that. So you have to tape those future opponents. I don't condone it, but I can see you wanting to get an upper edge against teams when you're playing, like Michigan State, for example, in 2021, they were ranked 9th. Or an Ohio State, or a Penn State. Obviously, don't condone that type of sign stealing, taping it, having an on-staffer get paid. Now, according to the report that ESPN put out, this on-staffer is someone that works in recruiting. He's also, on his Instagram, had a picture of him with 2 Michigan defensive staff members. This is big and this is serious, considering this is also a Michigan team, it says in the report, that is still facing 4 level 2 violations, which are considered less serious from those alleged violations. But that ruling from the NCAA is not expected until 2024. Also have to remember that earlier this year, their head coach was suspended a couple of games for a prior violation. So is this becoming Michigan's reputation? Now, there's still reports, they're still being investigated. That is obviously going to take some time. Who knows who decides the ruling? Because the NCAA, for some reason, with its members or the people that make the big decisions, they don't really, I don't want to say they don't do that much, but when it comes to stuff like this, they kind of, I guess, are unknown about it. They don't see it. They take some time. And obviously, with NIL and that type of era, when it was going on, they really didn't do it much, the NCAA. So who knows how long this is going to play out, what's going to be the ruling. And of course, in America, you're proven, innocent until guilty. We'll see, but just really, really tough. And I'm interested, since this is being reported out now, and you've still got a big chunk of your schedule left, and some really big opponents left on your schedule. Looking at it, they're going to have to play, of course, Ohio State, also have Penn State, so just two of those opponents. How does Michigan look after this? You have Michigan State this week. So when it's being reported that you're doing such and such, how does this team look afterwards? Because this is also a Michigan team that recently has been one of the best second half teams. They're always a great second half team. Going the conspiracy route, you could say, well, I guess hearing this report and hearing that seeing that they're one of the best second half teams, it must be when they get into the locker room, they finally got those types of calls, so they can do it in a hidden area in their locker room and say, here we go, we're switching to this. Still, has to be determined. Obviously, something Michigan doesn't want on their plate or have to deal with, have to talk to, especially when it comes to the media. The media is going to be asking them questions pre-game, post-game, during the week. But let me know in the comments what you all think. How is Michigan going to look after this? If they're still one of those teams that's really dominant, and listen, they haven't played anybody. Looking at their schedule, they played UNLV, East Carolina, Bowling Green, Rutgers, Nebraska, Minnesota, Indiana. They have unranked Michigan State this week. Really going to be interested in the ruling and how Michigan looks after this. So last night we had Thursday night football. Jayville goes into New Orleans, the Bayou. At first, Jacksonville had this game completely in their control. They were running the ball fantastic. Trevor Lawrence didn't have a great game, but he also didn't have a game where he was completely bad. And this has kind of been his level of play this season. He hasn't been completely bad, but he also hasn't been spectacular. And the type of hype that a lot of people said he would, being a first overall pick, what people had expectations wise for him. There's still plenty of season left, although surprisingly and sadly, we're 7 games into the season. We got 2 weeks until the season's halfway from being over. Jacksonville lets this game go in the second half. And a lot of what kept this game close was that the New Orleans Saints offense just couldn't get going. Derek Carr, for whatever reason, was only going to one read. Sometimes, if the Saints were even lucky, he would get to his second read. Then he would just dump it off. And listen, I have Alvin Kamara in fantasy in one of my leagues, and I liked it. He got me a boatload of points. But if you're the Saints, You want Derek Carr to go through more reads because you do have weapons. Yes, you do have Alvin Kamara, and he is a fantastic running back. But you also have Chris Olave, who can stretch the field. You also have Michael Thomas. So you have to get all these other guys the ball and involved. Second half, it was a lot different of a story. I don't know what was going on. The first half, Derek Carr was obviously visibly upset, was upset at Olave, even though that ball was quite like 4 or 5 yards out of bounds. I don't condone Olave or any wide receiver stopping on the route. But it wasn't until, as I mentioned in the first half, Carr was kind of skipping his reads, going through one and then immediately going for the check down. Who knows what's going on in his head, if he's worried about the type of protection that he's going to have, if he's worried that he's not going to be able to get to some of these other guys, or maybe they're just not open. Who knows what's going on, but when he was, and specifically in that second half, when he was going through multiple reads, finding guys, reading the play, getting down the timing, the offense was actually moving smoothly. There was a play in that first half where I cannot remember when it was, but the Saints were nearing the red zone. They were at like the 30-yard line. The defense is looking like they're playing this type of cloud coverage. The middle of the field's wide open. He has 22 running across the field, wide open. Even Kirk Herbstreit talked about it after the play was over, saying this is some of the frustrations you get with the Saints offense. He has 22 wide open over the middle. Instead, he just decides to throw it to Kamara. There's miscommunication. It looks like a bad miss. Could have been called for intentional grounding. It wasn't. But then they started to get it going. And we have to give a lot of credit to this Saints defense, specifically last night, just on a tear, forcing 3 and out after 3 and out. Keeping this team in the game. Keeping that momentum still on their side where it's teetering from this could get ugly really quick to, we could still have a chance in this game. Tons of credit to them. Fortunately for the Saints, loss. Feel really bad for Foster Moreau and all of what he's gone through this year, particularly, and then having that moment. Got to keep his head up. He's still a really good football player, and we all know he makes that catch. Unfortunate for him. He's got to keep his head up, keep his spirits high. Because in the NFL, when you're playing anything, you got to have a short-term memory, where if a negative play happens, you got to look forward and say, okay, that play one happened, doesn't exist anymore, I'll go make the next one. Last play of the game, I don't love the call from the New Orleans Saints. If you're going to run a fade route, I don't want to run it to Chris Olave, who's anywhere from 6 foot to 6'1". I'd rather prefer Michael Thomas. Really surgical, getting them down in that type of area, though. It was checkdowns. The defense, is going to be playing prevent, so the linebackers are going to be down the field. Let's run the ball. Kamara gets 15. Surgical drive, great play con from them. Carr was doing his thing. And the last thing I'll say about the New Orleans Saints and with Derek Carr. The money difference from him to Jameis Winston is $33 million. Now we know Jameis Winston, a lot of other people say he's not a great quarterback. From what Derek Carr has been playing like, specifically in last night's game, $33 million shouldn't be the difference if Derek Carr is going to be playing on a similar level to Jameis Winston. I think, in my opinion, Jameis Winston is someone they got to go to or at least kind of try out because he does push this ball down the field. Last year, him and Chris Olave had a connection. Then, him and Michael Thomas had a connection. Listen, Jameis Winston isn't the best. He's not someone that's going to take you over the top. But I'd say he's a decent starter and a more than capable enough starter in the league. He obviously did throw 30 passing touchdowns, but in that same season, he did throw 30 passing interceptions. If the level of play continues to keep up from Derek Carr and this offense, which we know is more than capable enough, do you at some point in time, if you're the New Orleans Saints, insert Jameis Winston? I want my audience to let me know what they think about that. If Derek Carr continues to play on this type of level, do you at some point go to Jameis Winston? And do you think Jameis should be the starter? Let me know in the comments. I appreciate your participation in my podcast and also your support. If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe, hit the bell, turn on the notifications, follow me on social media. My socials are TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, or formerly known as Twitter. Typing into the search bar, that's Textbook Sports. Click the profile, hit follow. I appreciate it. Now, talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars, they are 5-2, and in my opinion, it's one of the less convincing 5-2s or starts for any team. They did beat the Buffalo Bills. That to me is a big time convincing win for them. They haven't looked good all this season, but you look back since there's a stat out there that says since week 14 of last season, here are the teams that have had some of the best records. Kansas City is one of them. San Francisco is another one of them. Both of them are 10-1. But you look at the Jacksonville Jaguars since week 14 of last season, they are 10-2. Detroit Lions are the next team on that list at 9-2. So Jacksonville's been really good lately, and they've carried some of that momentum into the season. But somehow it's less convincing. Why? I don't understand this offense. You obviously have Calvin Ridley and all the weapons. Etienne is playing phenomenal. He's got a different gear this year. And I can't tell you why, but it just feels like this is a team that when they do get to the playoffs, or if they do, who knows, still a lot of games to be played left, they're going to be a first-round exit. I'll give them this credit because they played in a lot of out-of-the-country games. 3 different cities, all this traveling. So I'll give them that. And you still get 3 wins out of that. Gotta give them major props for that. But somewhere, it just feels like this team isn't what their record says they are as of right now. So it's the biggest game in college football right now, this week, October 21st, tomorrow at noon. Penn State and the Nittany Lions with James Franklin, Drew Aller, Nicholas Singleton, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Kalen King. They travel into the Horseshoe, Columbus, Ohio, against Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyle McCord, Ryan Day, and the Ohio State Buckeyes. Last year, this was a game about turnovers and passing. I still think it's going to be that type of game. It's going to be obviously any game. Feels like if you win the turnover battle, you win the football game. But to me, the team that passes the ball best and that has the best special teams will win this football game and come out of it victorious. You look at last year, Ohio State was down. JTT had a phenomenal football game. He had a pick 6, 2 interceptions, a batted ball, a forced fumble, a fumble recovery. I think it was anywhere from 1 to 3 sacks. I think he had 2, though. Does he have that type of game? Because this year for the Ohio State defensive line, they've been less than what I and everyone else expected them to be. JTT hasn't followed up from last year's type of play. Jack Sawyer hasn't done much. So who on that defensive line is going to have a signature game like JT had last year? Also in last year's game is about, of course, Ohio State had CJ Stroud on their roster, but they were able to pass the ball. They were able to push the ball down the field. This year, although I think it's going to have to be a lot about passing, the wild card in the mystery box is these are 2 quarterbacks we really don't know a whole lot about. I like Drew Aller. I think he's a really talented quarterback. But this is going to be his first big-time moment. Kyle McCord, this is going to be his second big-time moment. He's played in a big-time game, in an away game against Notre Dame. They won. He didn't play fantastic. And I get this sense with the Buckeyes offense that there's training wheels on it. I've gotten that sense with a lot of their offenses in the past, especially with Ryan Day. A lot of it's going to determine on what type of play calls he has and what type of Ryan Day comes out. Because if we see a Ryan Day from the Georgia game, I think Ohio State wins this game easily. But if we see a Ryan Day that this run game in particular, isn't working out well, he's not really on his A game in terms of play calling, that's going to be interesting, and that's where it gets really spooky for the Buckeyes. Both these quarterbacks, one of them is going to have a signature moment. Who's it going to be? Is Emeka Egbuka going to be in this game? Looking at this game, and I was watching this game in the years past. It's obviously one of those games that comes down to the fourth quarter, to the final minutes. But I think special teams is going to be what decides it. You look in that 2016 game, it was really a rough start for Ohio State. Really couldn't get the ball going down the field. Struggled in the run game. Defensively, it was just kind of rough for them. Obviously, Penn State did have a fair share of talent on that team. But the blocked kick that everyone knows about. Special teams are special for a reason. Field position can get a turnover, be in plus territory, always push that opposing team inside their own territory in the 20s, 10s. And then matchups-wise, lots of NFL scouts are going to be there, obviously, and of course, they should be. You get to watch Marvin Harrison Jr. go up against Kalen King. You get a taste or a look at what Drew Aller and Kyle McCord could be. You get a look at some of the players on that Ohio State defensive line, like Michael Hall, Tyleik Williams, JTT, Jack Sawyer. You get a look at the Ohio State secondary with Denzel Burke. He's played really well. Keandre Lambert-Smith for Penn State, the wideout. Olu Fashanu. How is that matchup going to be with Olu and JTT? A lot of scouts, NFL guys, representatives, whatever, however you want to call them, going to be using this game. Players are going to go up in the position rankings in the draft, or they'll have their stock skyrise, or their stock will fall, depending on how they look in this game. It's a big moment. Marvin Harrison Jr. really, it felt like every game last year was his big breakout game, but he really did break out. I think he had 10 catches, 185 in the game. Really clutch catches as well. So once again, a summary of the keys to win this football game. Special teams and who can pass the football more. Which team is more efficient passing the ball? Alabama, Tennessee this week. Last year, it was an all-time game. Jalen Hyatt had a monster day. New faces for both teams. For Alabama, you have Jalen Milroe at quarterback. Then for Tennessee, you're also making a change at quarterback with Joe Milton. This game, it feels like a game I think Alabama should win outright. They're more talented. It's going to be in their home stadium. They have the defense. Whereas with Tennessee, you're still trying to figure them out. Joe Milton has a huge arm. I mean, he can throw the ball 80 yards. He really can. I'm not joking about that. Strong arm. Josh Hoople last year really getting Alabama on those switch releases. He was having the wideouts go completely almost outside the numbers, near the sidelines. Switch releases was killing this Alabama defense. Can Alabama rewatch last year's tape, figure out something for the switch releases? Because a lot of it was just miscommunication. Obviously, Jalen Hyatt was taking the top off the defense, but a big portion of it was miscommunication between the defensive back and the safety. The safety is not getting enough depth because he's having to guard a wheel route. Meanwhile, the number 2 wide receiver is also going on a post. So it was really great game plan by Josh Hoople. For Tennessee, a lot of it hinges on their defense and how that defense is, if they can force turnovers against Jalen Milroe. Because Jalen Milroe has had his moments, but he's also had his bad moments as well. This is an Alabama team that last week against Arkansas, it was a close game. Alabama did control a majority of this game and they had a significant lead, but they also allowed Arkansas to crawl back into this game to where it was 24-21 final score, I believe. So while it feels like this Bama defense is just absolutely going to steamroll and this team is going to steamroll them if they can run the ball efficiently and play to Alabama's type of game, which is we're running the football, we play fantastic defense, that's the Saban way. But it also feels like if Tennessee can force turnovers, limit Alabama on third downs, win the third down battle, and if Tennessee can pass the ball, especially like they did last year, it's going to be a lot of shades of last year, and it's really interesting to watch. I think personally Alabama is going to steamroll this game. But there is that possibility where Milroe still hasn't found himself yet. And Tennessee is able to pass the ball. Not only are they able to pass the ball, but they can protect the quarterback, especially on the edges. Because last year they did a phenomenal job. They had Darnell Wright. He was a first-round draft pick, top 10, as a matter of fact. Protect the quarterback. Can they do that? Can you still pass the ball? Listen, I don't think Tennessee is going to be able to get big gains in the run game. You're going to have to rely on your quarterback a lot. But can you keep it honest? Can you keep the defense honest and get sufficient, maybe 2-3 yard runs and keep yourself ahead of the chains, excuse me. It's a CBS game of the week, and of course, we'll all be watching it. So who do you got in this game? All my listeners out there, everyone listening to this podcast, do you agree with me and believe that Alabama is going to steamroll this game? Or do you see that possibility where Tennessee is efficient on third down, can still pass that football, protect the quarterback, and make it really scary for Alabama? Let me know in the comments what you think. I appreciate your support, your participation in my podcast. It means a lot to me. If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe, be a friend, tell a friend, share it out to others, everyone who loves football and that sort of stuff. Follow me on social media, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, formerly now known as X. Type it into the search bar, That's Textbook Sports. You'll see the icon with purple letters and a football, basketball, soccer icon. Click that profile, click follow. Thank you. I appreciate it. It means the world to me. So baseball's going on now, and the old adage is that it's not a series until the away team wins a game. Well, now, in the Houston Astros and Texas Rangers series, The Astros have won 2. In this series, the home team hasn't won a single game. Now it goes back to Houston. The Rangers had this thing in the bag. I was okay with them losing Game 3. You obviously wanted to get one of the two. You would have loved, and in a perfect world, you would have gotten both games at home, closed out the series. You advanced into the World Series for the first time since 2011. Unfortunately, they're not. This was a team that was going really hot in the postseason. Hadn't lost a game until these previous 2. They put Scherzer in Game 3. Astros got going last night as well. But listen, this is an Astros team that on the road, they're absolute road warriors. I think the stat was they were 50 and I can't remember. It was somewhere in the 30s where they're just a fantastic road team. That's what they are. That's what they are. That's what they've been. So now all the pressure is back onto the Rangers. But there's also, I think, equal pressure for the Astros as well. They haven't won a home game in this series. Game 5 is always the most crucial game you need in a 2-2 split series. That, a majority of the time, not all the time, but a majority of the time, determines who advances. Then, in the National League, Philadelphia Phillies, they were getting hot. Phillies were also going up against a team that was really hot in the postseason. Diamondbacks hadn't lost a game until the first 2, and it looked like Philadelphia and Texas were just on this collision course to meet in the World Series. This went a lot closer than the Astros-Rangers last 2. Diamondbacks hit a walk-off, an emotional win for them. And I'll always say about emotional wins is that the next game, it's usually a letdown. So do the Diamondbacks have that type of adversity that they can have an emotional game and then the following week follow that up? Phillies got going red hot. We'll see if they make a change in their lineup, because the first 2 games they were absolutely slugging the baseball, knocking the stitches off of the baseball, scoring multiple runs. So do they make a change in their lineup? That'll be interesting to see and behold. I still like the Phillies in this series. I also like the Rangers in their series, but it's getting really close. Let me know, my audience, what you think. What's your World Series prediction? Of the 4 teams remaining left, who do you see advancing? Do you think it's going to be the Rangers and Phillies? Is it going to be the Diamondbacks and Astros? Let me know what you think in the comments. Once again, you've probably heard it a lot. I appreciate your support and participation. So, Caleb Williams, before the season started, had said that he's not too sure about whether or not he wants to enter the NFL draft. But if he was to enter the NFL draft, there's a list of prerequisites he would like. Now, recently, there's a report out there, it's been reported, that Caleb Williams, whatever team he's on, he wants some part of ownership. This ruffled a lot of people's feathers, just because this guy, he hasn't proven himself a whole lot. Well, he hasn't even proven himself at all on the NFL level. We know that he's been a great college quarterback, played bad these past couple of games, and it's not something you want to hear from your star quarterback where he's having this list of prerequisites and he's feeling like he wants the team to cater to him. I'm fine with quarterbacks wanting the team to cater to them. I think any quarterback, sometimes there's some you baby them, especially Aaron Rodgers, those types of level of quarterbacks. And there's different levels, there's different personalities of quarterbacks that do want to be babied, there's some that don't care. But any quarterback, for them to succeed, they need all the pieces. And when I'm talking about the pieces, I'm talking about the offensive line, an offensive-minded head coach, If you don't have the offensive-minded head coach, I'm not completely against having a defensive-minded head coach, but the only caveat is you need an excellent offensive mind, very much like what the Houston Texans are doing. But as going back to Caleb Williams, it kind of feels like this is a guy he wants to be babied a lot. Now, if he proves himself on the NFL playing field that he is who we think he is, and that's one of these generational prospects, lots of people are comparing him to Patrick Mahomes. I'm not going to compare him to Patrick Mahomes, but I think there are similarities in their game, especially the outside the pocket, off platform, off schedule throws. It just feels like each week the gap between Caleb Williams and the next best quarterback in college football is decreasing. Like it's slowly closing. And what hurts Caleb Williams, in my opinion, is that there are a plethora of quarterbacks in college that teams would give a look at. I mean, this is a really talented, stacked, deep quarterback class. I mean, just naming the quarterbacks in college that are performing really well off my head, outside of Caleb Williams, Drake May, Michael Penix, Shedeur Sanders, Bo Nix, Quinn Ewers has been playing well. J.J. McCarthy has been playing well, although McCarthy hasn't played any big opponents yet. I've mentioned Michael Penix. Loads of other guys I've probably forgot or are escaping my mind right now. If I have, please let me know who I missed. Bo Nix, obviously. But you get the pictures that there's a plethora of guys that NFL teams could say, well, we don't have to give up that much to go get Caleb, or we don't necessarily need to go get Caleb because I think we could be serviceable with these other guys. I think Caleb's going at this a strategical way in that, hey, I don't want to be entering an environment, being the first overall pick, where it's a terrible team, because that's most likely going to be the case. I don't want to face that. That's fine. A lot of other quarterbacks have done it. John Elway said he refused to play for the Colts, ended up on the Broncos, won a couple Super Bowls, one of the best quarterbacks ever in the NFL, talent-wise. So there are quarterbacks who can say, I don't want to play for this team. I get that. I understand it. You look at the quarterbacks that have had a promise, went to teams that are really bad, and it's ruined their careers. But let me know what your thoughts are on this Caleb Williams situation. It's feeling like this is a guy that feels like he's already proven himself in the NFL atmosphere. Feels like he's already proven he's got this huge ego. What are your thoughts on him? And if you're an NFL GM that needs a quarterback, your team needs a QB, team needs a quarterback, would you take Caleb Williams? Do you think the gap is closing, or are you preferring one of these other guys? Let me know what you all think in the comments. I, for one, I'm going to stick with it. I'm going to take Caleb Williams, but I will say the gap is closing every single week between him and the next best quarterback in the class. Like, I wouldn't be opposed with taking Drake May. I wouldn't be opposed with taking Shedeur Sanders. I wouldn't be opposed with taking Michael Penix. Those are the guys I'm really in love with right now, if some of them decide to go into the NFL draft. So, semi-big week in the NFL this week. Philadelphia Eagles, Miami Dolphins, primetime. Dolphins riding high, lost against the Bills. That was not deflating. It looked really bad for them. Philadelphia Eagles have been sliding by with talent. Obviously, in the NFL, and anywhere practically, talent only gets you so far. Lots of issues with play calling. Offense hasn't looked as good as last year. Although when you look at the numbers, they're just about the same as last year. Only thing is Jalen Hurts has turned the ball over 7 times. Hurts is not playing at that same level. So how does Philadelphia get right? How do they get things back? In my opinion, they have to be that team that's focused on running the football. You can't be this pass-happy team. Now, someone I listened to made a great point saying that maybe it's Jalen Hurts. A.J. Brown was upset week 2 against the Minnesota Vikings that he's not getting the calls. So then the offense was going to this pass-heavy offense, which is not the identity of the team. It's not what they lean on. This team leans on Jalen Hurts and their ability to run the football. Before they had their breakout year last year, this was a team that was first in just about every single rushing category. DeAndre Swift, more than capable running back, actually fits this offense well. He's a solid piece on this offense because he can receive, and he's also had that power back element, which is something he didn't have in Detroit, and a lot of people harped on him about. Gainwell, so you have everything. Secondary-wise, though, defensive-wise, this thing is getting ugly. Darius Slay, all these other guys out. You don't know if they're going to be able to play as of right now. If I'm Howie Roseman, I've got to do everything in my power to go get an elite secondary player. There's been discussions and reports that the Philadelphia Eagles are talking about maybe acquiring Jeremy Chin, Panther safety via trade. I like that for them. I would do that. I think the big splash, slam dunk move for them is to go out, trade for Patrick Surtain. I think that really puts them over the top and really puts them over the edge. If Denver's willing to do, we don't know if Denver's willing to do that or not. We know that they've had discussions about trading some of their wide receivers, entering into a fire sale, a rebuild process. The Colts are thinking about acquiring Jerry Jeudy. Philadelphia Eagles, key for them is, especially defensively, and I think in general, is to be physical. They've got to be this physical football team. Because the Miami Dolphins, what I saw in that loss to the Buffalo Bills, the Bills were just more physical than them. The Dolphins have all these track star athletes, but they're not the most physical team and physical imposing team. If the defensive linemen, if they can't get pressure to Tua, which I think they're going to have a good day at getting pressure to Tua, but if you can't do that, all you got to do is just put your hands up. We know Tua, a shorter quarterback, ball's going to be batted down. But like I said, this is a team that they're really fancy and they're creative, innovative. They have all these ways of motion. They're ahead of the curve offensively. But this is a team that if you're physical with them on both sides of the ball, they'll crumble. That's the recipe for Philadelphia. If you're the Miami Dolphins, you have to be physical back. If Philadelphia gives a punch, not literally, you have to be physical back. You got to hit them with a couple jabs too. And then this is an offense too that relies on that track speed. You know Philadelphia's secondary, they're going to be hurt. They've struggled this season. So you're just going to want to attack that. It's obviously going to be the full Mike McDaniel display with crossing routes, tons of motion, having Tyreek in the backfield, a lot of Texas routes, option routes, all of that sort of stuff. I still like the Philadelphia Eagles just because of the all-around roster that they have, but it is scaring me seeing that they're not going back to who they are or have found an identity offensively. And then on top of that, secondary-wise, they're really struggling. So it's surprising to be 5-1, but it's also alarming when you see the upcoming schedule they have. Now, lastly, to end this podcast, it's going to be NFL Sunday game picks. Starting off right here, we've got the Atlanta Falcons and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. A lot of the Atlanta Falcons and a lot of their wins is when Desmond Ridder has had a really solid game. He did have a really solid game last time, Also did throw the game-ending interception. Lots of confusion offensively. I like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this one. Baker Mayfield's playing really good. Buccaneers defense should get pressure, should confuse Desmond Ridder. I like them in a close one. Then the Las Vegas Raiders and the Chicago Bears. Both teams' starting quarterbacks are going to be out this game. I don't know if the Raiders are going to go with O'Connell, the rookie, or they're going to go with Hoyer. Surprisingly, I feel like Chicago wins this game, but they're only going to have one starter on that offensive line, and that offensive line, even with the starters, is pretty bad. They're below the league. Give me the Raiders. I like them in a not so entertaining game. Browns, Colts. With how this Cleveland Browns defense has been playing defensively, from a statistical standpoint, a schematic standpoint, if Deshaun Watson is back, who knows if he will be. I like Cleveland. Gardner Minshew, not the most surprising QB or anyone that really moves the needle, but he's also he's a backup, but he's a backup you don't want to face, if that's weird to say. Give me Cleveland in that one. Next up, Commanders, Giants. Giants having all sorts of problems on that offensive line. Commanders with their defensive line and talent. Jack Del Rio, if he doesn't get pressure on the quarterback and this defense doesn't play very good, he's going to be on the hot seat. Give me the Commanders in that one. Big game. Lions, Ravens. Lions 5-1, Ravens 4-2. Lamar Jackson been playing at an all-time, not an all-time, but an elite level. Detroit Lions executing the football. Ben Johnson executing plays. Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, having a really solid year. This team is rolling. I like the Lions in this one. Ravens have had some good wins, then they've had some really bad losses. Losses that they really shouldn't have lost, specifically against the Colts, Steelers, so it's going to be a close game. Give me the Detroit Lions to have them move to 6-1. Bills, Patriots. I don't think there's much more that needs to be said about this one. Bills should win this one easily. If they do have struggles against this Patriots team that has hardly any offensive weapons, it's going to look rough for them. If the Patriots can run the football, establish the offense, establish the trenches, it's going to get scary for Buffalo. I still like them, though. Cardinals, Seahawks. Cardinals, despite their record, only having one win on the season, have been playing really solid. Seattle Seahawks. I'm going to go with Seattle in this one. Arizona's been playing really well. Reports that Kyler Murray's getting back onto the practice field, so it's all feel good for them. Dobbs has been playing well. But give me the Seahawks. I think this is a breakout game for Jackson Smith and Jigba. Cardinals, defensive secondary, ranking really low in the league. Steelers and Rams. I like the Rams in this game. Only key issue is how is their protection going to hold up against TJ Watt. This is a pretty good Steelers pass rush, pretty good Steelers defense. Although I don't think the Steelers have any answers for Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. I like the Rams in this one at home. Chargers, Chiefs. After what the Chargers have done all year, the way Justin Herbert played against Dallas, I like the Chiefs. Then next up, we have the Green Bay Packers versus the Denver Broncos. Green Bay, after a bye week, I like them. Denver Broncos offense has all kinds of struggles. Defense has all kinds of struggles. Give me Green Bay in that one pretty easily. Next up, 49ers, Vikings, Monday Night Football. I skipped over Dolphins, Eagles just because I talked that one before. But 49ers, Vikings, give me the 49ers. They come off of a loss in a game that they should have won against the Cleveland Browns. I think against that Vikings offense with no Justin Jefferson, hardly any weapons, a struggling offensive line with that 49ers pass rush, then what the 49ers can do offensively. I don't know the status of Debo and Christian McCaffrey. Looks like Christian McCaffrey's going to play. If he does, and even if he doesn't, I still like the 49ers in this game. So those are the NFL Sunday game picks of the week. Audience, let me know in the comments who do you think wins every single one of these games. I appreciate your support. Once again, like this video, subscribe, be a friend, tell a friend, share this podcast to all those who, whether they like football, big college football fans, MLB fans, going to be talking about basketball pretty soon. And then once again, as I've mentioned, follow me on social media, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, now known as X. Type it into the search bar, That's Textbook Sports. You'll see the icon with the sports icons in purple letters saying That's Textbook Sports. Click that profile. Click follow. It means a lot to me. I appreciate it. I appreciate y'all. Have a wonderful day. God bless. Take care, every one of y'all. And until next time,